Healing yourself. We have now come to a topic that I consider to be extremely important, but which many religious and spiritual people ignore. I have already told you that your live stream has been on this planet for a very long time. One glance at history should demonstrate that you have most likely been involved in one or more wars or other atrocities. It should be obvious that such traumatic experiences can cause your soul to become wounded and bruised. Therefore, it should be easy to see that you have a need to heal your soul. The word soul comes from the Greek word psyche. Psyche and soul are interchangeable terms. In the terminology that we of the Ascended Masters use today, the soul is a vehicle that the conscious you creates in order to interact with the physical body. Your soul does follow you over many lifetimes, but in the end, you can ascend only by giving up the soul, by letting the soul, the sense of identity based on the soul vehicle, die so you can be reborn into a new identity based on the Christ mind. As I told Nicodemus, only the being that descended from heaven can ascend back to heaven. That being is what I have called the conscious you, the pure aspect of your lower being. If your soul has been severely wounded, it can be difficult for you to stop identifying with the soul, and thus you cannot give up the soul, give up the ghosts that make up the soul. For further teachings on the soul, see the book, The Power of Self. I have told you that the essence of the path to personal Christhood is that you must put off the old human, the sense of identity based on the death consciousness, and put on the new human, namely a sense of identity based on the Christ self and your God-given individuality. The biggest obstacle to this process is that people tend to become very attached to certain aspects of their lower sense of identity, the soul. The cause of this attachment is the emotional wounds that your soul has received in the past. Your emotional wounds can cause you to become attached to elements of your false sense of identity or to certain false ideas. In many cases, a traumatic experience from the past caused you to accept a false belief about yourself, about God, or about some aspect of life. The traumatic experience also caused your soul to experience intense emotional pain. The pain generated a pool of negative energy, and this energy is stored in the soul, in your personal energy field. If you have not healed your soul, the emotional energy is still there. Therefore, any attempt to reconsider the false belief will inevitably open up the old wound and cause your conscious mind to reconnect with the negative energy. As a result, you will re-experience the emotional pain. Many people are afraid of reconsidering a false idea because they do not want to deal with the pain. However, it is a brutal fact of life that in order to free yourself from your false beliefs, you must be willing to open the Pandora's box of your past. Many people are afraid to open this box and look into their own psyche. In fact, I see many people who use religion or spirituality as an excuse for not dealing with the wounds of the psyche. These people focus their attention on the outer aspect of religion, or they focus on practicing a spiritual technique. They reason that if only they follow all of the outer rules, go to church every Sunday, or practice some spiritual technique, then they can somehow avoid having to deal with the pain in the psyche. I am very happy to see the numerous self-improvement techniques that are available today. Not all of them are beneficial, and not all of them were inspired by the Ascended Masters. Yet many of them do come from us, and we have released them to assist you on your path. However, I must tell you that a spiritual technique cannot replace the need for psychological healing. You cannot simply pray, meditate, or sit in a yoga posture and assume that this will automatically heal your psychology. Why a spiritual technique cannot heal you. Let me explain why a spiritual technique cannot heal your psychology for you. The human experience is produced by the choices you make by exercising your God-given free will. When you experience a traumatic situation, there are two aspects of that situation. One aspect is the outer situation, for example, what another human being does to you. Another aspect is the inner situation, namely how you choose to respond to that situation. I want you to understand I am in no way saying that it is right to harm another human being. If someone harms you, that person will inevitably make karma. However, it is a brutal fact that the cause of a psychological wound is not the other person's actions. What causes the wound is your inner reaction to those actions. Human beings react very differently to similar situations. One person might think that a situation is no big deal, and that person simply moves on without being emotionally scarred by the situation. Another person can use the same situation to build a negative self-image that can stay in the soul for lifetimes. The causes of your psychological wounds are the decisions you made concerning how you responded to traumatic or painful situations. Therefore, the essential key to healing your wounds is that you must consciously go back to the original choice and make a better decision. For example, a child who is sexually, physically, or emotionally abused often builds a negative self-image dominated by guilt and a sense of unworthiness. No amount of prayer, meditation, or yoga exercises will remove that negative self-image. As we will see in the next section, a spiritual exercise might remove the negative energy created in the original situation. To remove the false image, you must replace the original decision or decisions with a new and better decision based on the understanding that you are a spiritual being created in the image and likeness of God. There are many techniques on the market today that can assist you to go into the depths of your psyche and free yourself from the negative gravitational pull of your past. I can assure you that if some of these techniques had been available 2,000 years ago, I would have had all of my disciples go into some form of therapy or psychological healing. I consider it absolutely vital that you make a conscious and determined effort to heal the wounds in your psychology. These wounds form a dead weight that will greatly hinder you as you attempt to climb the path of Christhood. Why drag along this heavy weight when you can remove it by applying a suitable method of psychological healing? The healing of your psychology is an extremely important topic, and I simply do not have space to cover all of its facets in this book. However, we of the Ascended Masters have provided several other books that outline the practical steps to healing your psychology. One final thought. I earlier told you that by turning the other cheek, you will avoid making personal karma from a situation. However, this also has an inner aspect. If you can turn the other cheek and react with total forgiveness, then you will avoid creating an emotional scar in your soul. You can simply let go of the situation and move on as if it never happened. As you grow in Christhood and heal your psychology, you will attain the ability to respond with love, forgiveness, harmony, and peace to any situation that life throws at you. The ability to have full control over your inner reactions to outer situations is the very key to personal freedom. It is also the key to spiritual freedom. Transforming negative energy. I have told you that you live in a universe in which everything is energy. Therefore, everything you do is done with energy. If you commit a wrong act, that act has the following consequences. An energy impulse is sent out into the universe, and it will be returned to you in the form of personal karma. You generate negative energy that is stored in your personal energy field, and it can have unpleasant effects on your thoughts and feelings. I have also told you that I have personally carried humankind's karma for these past 2,000 years. My dispensation for doing this is coming to an end, and therefore humankind's karma is now descending upon this planet. This descent of karma can have negative effects for your personal life and for the planet as a whole. Therefore, any serious spiritual seeker needs to consider the question of how he or she can transform negative energy. You can greatly accelerate your spiritual growth by finding a spiritual technique that allows you to raise the vibration of negative energy into its original purity as spiritual energy. How could you possibly do this? Science tells us that energy exists in the form of waves that have different frequencies, amplitudes, and wavelengths. When two energy waves meet, the interaction of the two waves creates what scientists call an interference pattern. This pattern can change the vibrational properties of both waves. To make a long story short, if a wave of high frequency energy meets a wave of low frequency energy, the resulting interaction can raise the vibration of the low frequency energy. The potential of transforming low frequency energy into spiritual energy is the foundation for all spiritual growth. You have heard it said that not one jot and tittle of the law shall pass away until all be fulfilled. When you choose to descend into the material universe and cut yourself off from your spiritual teacher, the law of cause and effect became your teacher. According to this law, you are ultimately accountable for what you do with God's energy. This accountability goes all the way back to your first embodiment in the material universe. You have had thousands of embodiments on this planet, and therefore you could potentially have created a very large pool of negative energy. God requires that before you can ascend into the spiritual world, you must transform that negative energy back into its original purity. There are many ways to transform negative energy, such as prayer, fasting, good works, or various spiritual techniques and practices. You can also balance or neutralize negative energy by experiencing the effects of the return of that energy or karma. This can manifest as negative events in your life, such as a disease or accidents. Obviously, this is the hard way to balance your karma. It is far better to balance the karma before it actually manifests as a physical event. This is quite possible, and from the beginning of time, God has provided the opportunity to balance negative energy without experiencing physical effects of the karma. One might say that every spiritual technique known to humankind was originally designed to help you invoke spiritual energy, spiritual light, that can serve to transform the negative energy that you have generated. Obviously, these ideas are another example of what was removed from my true teachings. In fact, hardly any orthodox religion contains these ideas. Nevertheless, I strongly encourage you to realize the validity and the value of these teachings. I can assure you that you live in a time when there is a great need for the transformation of negative energy. The personal aspect of this is that you must transform your personal karma. In fact, if you are serious about attaining Christhood, you need to make a determined effort to apply a spiritual technique for transforming negative energy. The planetary aspect is that the returning karma of humankind could have a number of negative effects for society and for the planet. These potential effects have been described through a number of prophecies delivered from various sources. I want you to understand that prophecy is not set in stone. Prophecy is given as a warning or what might come to pass if people do not change their ways. Therefore, there is a potential to turn back prophecy, and the key to doing so is to transform the negative energy before it actually manifests as physical events. A special dispensation. Our God is a God of mercy, and your heavenly parents are not blind to the current predicament on planet Earth. Therefore, they have decided to provide a way out. I already told you that all spiritual techniques are designed to help you invoke spiritual energy and thereby transform negative energy. However, I must tell you that the spiritual techniques practiced by most people simply are not powerful enough to transform the amount of personal and planetary karma that is being returned in these years. Once again, there is a way out. I earlier told you that my father, the beloved Saint Joseph, is today an ascended being, an ascended master. His name is Saint Germain, and he has been appointed as the spiritual hierarch for the age of Aquarius. I can assure you that I have the utmost respect and admiration for my brother of light, Saint Germain. I am extremely gratified that he has been appointed as the spiritual leader for the next 2,000 years. When Saint Germain was appointed to be my successor, he clearly realized the predicament of humankind's returning karma, as I have described it to you. Therefore, Saint Germain saw the need to release a spiritual technique that was more efficient than anything previously released on this planet. This was not a straightforward matter because people have shown a great willingness to misuse any spiritual technique given to them. As people have been willing to misuse atomic energy, they have also been willing to misuse spiritual energy. Therefore, Saint Germain had to apply for a cosmic dispensation, and after much deliberation by the spiritual hierarchs above us, that dispensation was granted. Saint Germain was granted permission to publicly release a spiritual technique that for thousands of years has been known only by a small group of advanced life streams. In the past, the technique has been known by many names. Saint Germain chose to release this spiritual technique under the name the Violet Flame. The name refers to the fact that this technique is aimed at invoking a form of spiritual light that vibrates at frequencies just above the material universe. Violet light has the highest frequency of visible light. If you are serious about transforming personal and planetary karma, then I cannot see how you can do this without making use of the violet flame. This form of spiritual energy is extremely efficient in terms of transforming the negative energy created by human beings. It is more powerful than any other spiritual technique currently found on this planet. There are many ways to invoke the violet flame, including religious rituals, prayers, affirmations, and visualizations. However, the most efficient way to invoke this energy is through the spoken word. I highly recommend that you make use of a technique for invoking the violet flame, such as the decrees included in the following discourse. You do not have to abandon your membership of any current church or spiritual organization to do this. The invocation of the violet flame is a universal spiritual technique that is truly a gift from God. I would like to see it practiced by all who consider themselves to be my followers. The spiritual technique called the violet flame is a gift from God to all people on earth. When I decided to carry the burden of humankind's karma, it was my hope that people would make wise use of this dispensation. I had hoped that by applying my true teachings, people would become spiritual millionaires. Therefore, when their karma had to be returned to them, it would have been easy for them to pay off their debt to life without slowing down their spiritual progress. Unfortunately, as I have already explained, this did not come to pass. Therefore, humankind is now in a double jeopardy. For the past 2,000 years, people have created more karma, and they are currently dealing with the effects of that karma. At the same time, the karma that I have carried is being returned to them. Obviously, it is not my desire to see people in this predicament. The very best hope I see for turning around the situation is that millions of people will decide to apply Saint Germain's gift of the violet flame. If millions of people, be they Christians or non-Christians, will apply this technique, it will be possible to consume the burden of returning karma on both the personal and planetary level. Therefore, my original intention for carrying humankind's karma could still be fulfilled. The golden age that I envisioned for planet Earth could be manifest during the age of Aquarius. I hope you will seriously consider applying a technique for invoking the violet flame. I do not know what more I could say to recommend the violet flame to you. Come apart in consciousness. Modern science has demonstrated that the entire material universe is made from energy. Science has also demonstrated that energy cannot be created and it cannot be destroyed. These two facts contain an important key to understanding the statement, come apart and be separate and chosen people. I have already told you that this statement, first and foremost, means that you must come apart in consciousness. Let me now give you a more detailed explanation. I am a spiritual being, and I see many things that are hidden to the physical sight of most people. I see many things that are attacking those who are truly striving for spiritual growth. Let me describe these forces to you. First and foremost, you need to learn how to protect yourself from negative energy. I have told you that everything you do is done with God's energy. You are constantly receiving a stream of spiritual energy that flows from your I Am presence into your energy field. You express that energy through thoughts, feelings, and actions. In the process of expressing energy, that energy is qualified according to the contents of your consciousness. In other words, as you express spiritual energy, you change the vibration of that energy. A positive thought, feeling, or action will generate energy of a high frequency. A negative thought, feeling, or action will generate energy of a low frequency. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed into another form of energy. The significance of this fact is that the negative energy generated by human beings will not simply disappear. Some of that negative energy will be sent out into the universe, and it will be returned to you by the law of cause and effect, the law of karma. However, some of the negative energy generated by human beings will remain with them. Even modern science is beginning to realize that there is an energy field surrounding the human body. Science has also begun to realize that there is an energy field surrounding the planet. I will not go into further detail here, but I will tell you that your personal energy field acts as a storehouse for both negative and positive energy. Likewise, the energy field of the planet is a storehouse for both negative and positive energy generated by human beings. I am sure that if you look at human history, you will realize that humankind has generated an enormous amount of negative energy. It should not be difficult to imagine that the energy field of planet Earth is literally a cesspool of negative energy. You live in that cesspool of energy. You can look at your personal energy field as one drop in the planetary ocean of energy. The question now becomes how your personal energy field, and thereby your thoughts and emotions, is affected by the energy in the planetary energy field. I must tell you that there is currently so much negative energy stored in the energy field of this planet that unless you make a very determined effort to free yourself from the negative gravitational pull of this energy, you will inevitably be pulled down. Millions of people on this planet are so overpowered by the planetary energy field that they literally are unable to maintain the integrity of their personality and individuality. In other words, their minds and emotions have been swallowed up by what one might call a mass mind or mass consciousness. These people are like sheep who blindly follow the currents that flow through the ocean of mass consciousness. Obviously, I do not want my followers to be part of this mass mind. How could you possibly walk the path of individual Christhood if your mind is overpowered by some mass consciousness that cancels out your individuality? Therefore, you must come apart from this mass consciousness and establish a hollowed sphere around your personal energy field. Doing so is not difficult when you have the right tools, and I will give you those tools. Defend your light. You must learn how to defend yourself from evil spirits. I am aware that many Christians and many spiritually interested people who are part of the so-called New Age movement are reluctant to consider the topic of evil spirits. This reluctance is based on a defense mechanism that is built into the human psyche. The simple fact is that the human psyche does not want to recognize a danger from which it thinks it cannot defend itself. Yet if you read the scriptures, you will see that I often cast out evil spirits. Therefore, you cannot afford to ignore the topic of evil spirits. Let me make haste to tell you that there is indeed an effective defense against all evil spirits. When medical science first discovered bacteria, many people refused to accept the existence of bacteria. They did not want to accept that there could be some microscopic organism, an organism which they could not see, that could attack their bodies. Yet as soon as you recognize the existence of a hidden danger, you can begin to look for ways to defend yourself against that danger. On the other hand, if you remain willfully ignorant, you cannot find such a defense. There are 3 types of spirits that you need to know. Malicious spirits. A malicious spirit, also called a demon, is a spirit that has rebelled against God and therefore has cut itself off from God. I have stated that you can remain alive only because you are receiving a constant stream of spiritual energy from above. If a being continues to rebel against God for a long period of time, that being will gradually diminish the flow of spiritual energy, and eventually that flow is completely cut off. Due to a mechanism which I will not here describe in detail, such a being or spirit can continue to exist, but it can do so only by stealing spiritual energy from those who are still receiving energy from above. In other words, a malicious spirit is a spirit who can survive only by stealing spiritual energy from human beings. Such spirits will seek to steal this energy through many different means, but one of the most frequently used is to manipulate human beings into engaging in negative thoughts, feelings, or actions. You must understand that such spirits exist. You must understand that they can continue to exist only by stealing spiritual energy from human beings. You must understand that they will do absolutely anything to force or fool you into misusing or misqualifying God's pure energy. Disembodied souls. A human body is only a temporary abode for the conscious you and the soul. When the human body dies, you leave the body behind and travel into one of the lower levels of the spiritual world. Usually, a being resides in this realm for some time and goes through a process of healing and learning. Unfortunately, some people become very attached to the life they live in this world. When the body dies, the person cannot get itself to leave the body and the life behind. Therefore, instead of going into the realms of light, as described by so many people who have had a near-death experience, the soul remains stuck in the material world. It is possible that such a discarnate soul can attach itself to you and seek to gain interest into your energy field and consciousness. The soul might not necessarily do this out of evil intent, and the soul is simply trying to fill some kind of need that it was not able to fill while in a physical body. While such a soul might not have evil intent, seeking to influence you is nevertheless a violation of your free will and a violation of the law of God. You must never allow such a soul entry into your consciousness. Entities, spirits. Everything is made from energy, but energy is simply a manifestation of God's consciousness. Therefore, energy is truly a form of consciousness, which some scientists have already realized. If you concentrate negative energy to a sufficient intensity, that energy can develop a certain rudimentary form of awareness. This does not mean that the energy has individuality or self-awareness. However, it does mean that the energy has a certain form of survival instinct and a drive to multiply itself. Therefore, a concentrated cloud of negative energy can become what I call an entity or spirit. You can think of this as a floating cloud of negative energy, but it is a cloud with a certain state of consciousness and an intent to multiply itself by stealing energy from human beings. Invoke spiritual light. I am aware that most people would rather not think about such topics, yet being forewarned is being forearmed. I can tell you that evil spirits, disembodied souls, or entities are a major factor in any type of addiction known to human beings. It becomes much easier to defend yourself from falling into the trap of addiction or to escape this trap. It becomes much easier to defend yourself from falling into the trap of addiction or to escape this trap when you know what you are up against. To see how you can defend yourself from these forces, you only need to understand that everything is made from God's energy. The material universe is made from energy of a much lower vibration than the energies found in the spiritual world. Your defense is to invoke high-frequency spiritual energy from above. That energy can literally create a shield around your mind and energy field which no lower energies can penetrate. It can also fill your energy field so that there is no room for evil spirits to enter. When I cast out evil spirits, I gave the teaching that if the house, meaning the person's energy field, was left empty, the evil spirit might return and bring other spirits with it. To avoid this, you must never leave your house empty. Therefore, make an effort to fill your energy field with high-frequency spiritual energy. Many religious rituals are designed to fill your mind with God's light, and I will later teach you other ways to invoke light. In fact, if you will let us, I or your Christ self will enter and fill your energy field so that no imperfect spirits can enter. I need you to recognize that you are living in a sea of negative energy. In that sea are sharks in the form of demons, disembodied souls, and entities or spirits. I am sure this will not cause you to be unduly frightened. You know that there are sharks in the ocean, yet that does not keep you from going for a swim. You simply take the necessary precautions to avoid being attacked by a shark. In other words, I do not want you to be paralyzed by fear so that you do not dare to engage in the process of life. I simply want you to be aware of the danger so that you can take the necessary precautions and protect yourself from these dangers. In a later section, I will give you the necessary tools to build an effective spiritual defense. However, any positive change in your life begins with increased awareness and understanding. You need to increase your awareness of negative energy so that you can recognize places, people, or situations that have a concentration of such energy. Thereby, you can begin to make wise choices and avoid rushing in where angels fear to tread. Surrender. The tools I have described so far have all been active tools that empower you to do something about specific aspects of your situation. I will now give you a tool that might seem to be passive and that some may think is less powerful. Yet in reality, it is the most powerful tool of all. This tool is the act of surrender, the act of letting go of all that is unreal. You might recall that the Archangel Gabriel appeared to my beloved mother to announce that she would give birth to the Christ child. You must understand that giving birth to a child at that particular time in her life was not a simple matter. For example, the fact that she was unmarried would inevitably pose certain complications. Yet my mother did not reject the messenger of God. She simply said, "Be it unto me according to thy will." Had it not been for this act of surrender by my blessed mother, the Christ might not have been born on this planet. You must understand that before the Christ can be born in you, you too must come to a point where you are willing to surrender your all to God. What exactly is it that you must surrender? I have told you many times that you are created in the image and likeness of God. Therefore, you are already a son or daughter of God. Presently, your outer mind cannot accept that divine identity. Therefore, your true identity as a spiritual being is covered up by an image or idol. This image can be likened to a jigsaw puzzle with many pieces. The path to personal Christhood is a process whereby you systematically remove the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that are covering up your true identity. Therefore, it is these pieces that you must surrender one by one. You must surrender every aspect of the death consciousness. You must surrender relativity and horizontal reasoning. You must surrender all prejudice. You must surrender all judgment. You must surrender all fear. You must surrender all anger. You must surrender all guilt, all sense of unworthiness. You must surrender the very idea that you are a sinner. You must surrender all false beliefs with which you have become comfortable. You must surrender all attachment to the things of this world. You must surrender all human or relative desires. You must surrender all wounds and scars in your psychology. You must surrender the original decision to turn away from God, and you must surrender the human ego which sprang from that decision. You must surrender all false sense of identity as a mortal, limited human being. You must surrender the human or egoic will, which is always out of sync with the divine will. You must surrender all sense of separation from God and your spiritual self. You must surrender the belief that you are the doer and accept that God is the only doer in your life. You must surrender all pride so that you can fully understand and accept the truth in the statement, I of my own self, the egoic mind, can do nothing. It is the Father, the spiritual self, within me who is doing the work. You must surrender everything that stands between you and the acceptance of your true identity as a spiritual being with the potential to walk the earth as a Christed being. Be it unto me according to your will. When I appear to announce that you are ready for the birth of the Christ in you, you must be able and willing to simply say, be it unto me according to thy will. You must be able to make that statement out of your own free will and with a peace of mind that comes from a complete resolution of all that stands between you and your God. All of the other tools I have given you are designed to help you reach a state of mind wherein you have made peace with God and peace with me. God has given you free will. God desires to see you come home to his kingdom, but God wants you to come home as the result of your own free will choosing. God has no desire to force you. I have no desire to force you. Both your Father and I want to see you resolve all that causes you to turn away from God or feel that you are not worthy of coming home to God. As long as you have any trace of resentment, fear, pride, anger, unworthiness, or any other negative emotions towards God, you will not be able to make the choice to fully accept your true identity. Therefore, you cannot put on the fullness of your individual Christhood. Surrender is not something that can be forced. Therefore, do not try to force yourself into surrendering. Instead, I am asking you to use the other tools I have given you and resolve the issues in your psyche that prevent you from being at peace with God. As you begin to resolve some of the wounds and blocks in your psychology, you will begin to feel a greater sense of inner peace. You will begin to realize that you are making peace with God. As you become aware of this process, I am asking you to deeply and sincerely consider the concept of surrender. Do not seek to force yourself to surrender. Seek to resolve the issues in your soul that are preventing you from accepting who you truly are. If you will go through the effort of resolving the issues that separate you from your true identity, you will find that the act of surrender will begin to happen spontaneously. Suddenly, you will feel as if a knot in your psyche has been undone. As a result of this resolution, a heavy burden will be lifted from you, and when you are no longer weighed down by that burden, you will begin to feel the unconditional love that God has for you. As you begin to experience, absorb, and accept God's unconditional love, you will realize that all sense of separation and all sense of unworthiness is completely unreal. Therefore, the act of surrendering that which is unreal will not seem like a loss. When you begin to experience God's unconditional love, you realize that you are not giving up anything by surrendering the human imperfections. Instead, the act of surrender is the master key to immortal life. Choose life. Choose to surrender all that is less than eternal life. Surrender all that is unreal, and you shall have all that is real. Holding the Immaculate Concept. I will now give you another tool which at first might seem passive, but which is extremely powerful. Because of the cult of idolatry built around my person, many people think I was born in the fullness of my personal Christhood. I did indeed have great attainment before the last embodiment, but I had not put on the fullness of my Christhood. I followed the very same path that you are following, and I did not manifest my full Christhood until I appeared at the wedding in Canaan. During this entire process, my blessed mother used a very powerful spiritual tool to help me. My mother knew of my potential before my birth, and she always held the vision of what I would become. She held the immaculate concept of my Christhood. You will recall that when I was at the wedding in Canaan, it was my mother who gently prodded me to turn the water into wine and thereby perform the miracle that would mark the point of no return for my Galilean mission. You will also recall that I resisted her prodding. I was hesitant to begin my mission because I knew that as soon as I started it, there would be no way of turning back. As she had done so many times before, my blessed mother held the immaculate concept for me, and by doing so, she gave me the inner strength to cross the line and begin my mission. I have told you that I want to see God's kingdom manifest on earth. I have also told you that this can come to pass only as a result of free will choices made by those in embodiment. The most important thing you can do to help bring about God's kingdom is to practice the spiritual technique of holding the immaculate concept. You must visualize God's kingdom as being already manifest on earth. When you hold the immaculate concept, you are not engaging in wishful thinking. Some people will think that visualizing God's kingdom when there is so much darkness on earth is simply denial or daydreaming. However, this is a very superficial viewpoint. I have told you that without God was not anything made that was made. The consequence is that everything in the entire universe is made from God's substance and energy. Obviously, many of the things happening on planet Earth are not in accordance with God's vision and God's perfection. Nevertheless, everything that is occurring on this planet is done with God's energy. Therefore, no matter what the outer appearances might be, the inner reality is that all conditions on earth have the potential to be transformed into the original purity of God's perfection. Seeing perfection. Why are there imperfect manifestations on earth today? Because human beings have used their creative potential to focus their attention on imperfect forms and images. Therefore, the spiritual energy streaming through their minds has been qualified according to this imperfect vision. The imperfect conditions found on planet Earth today can continue to exist only because people continue to allow their spiritual energy to flow into these imperfect images and visions. What is the only possible way to change this situation? It is that people take their conscious attention away from human imperfections and focus it firmly on the perfection of God. I earlier used the image of a film projector and movie screen. The current conditions on earth are simply images that are projected onto the screen of life. The light that projects these images is the spiritual energy that flows through the minds of all human beings. However, the images themselves are the product of the film strip through which the light passes on the way to the screen. That film strip represents the contents, the images and beliefs of the consciousness of human beings. The only way to change the images that appear on the screen of life is to change what is on the film strip in people's minds. Therefore, the only way to bring God's kingdom to earth is that a large number of people decide to hold the immaculate concept and focus their attention on God's perfection. I want you to seriously contemplate that holding the Immaculate Concept is an extremely powerful spiritual technique. I want you to do the following. Hold the Immaculate Concept for yourself and for your personal Christhood. Hold the Immaculate Concept for all your brothers and sisters on the path. Hold the Immaculate Concept even for those who seem to be your enemies. Hold the Immaculate Concept for your local community. Hold the Immaculate Concept for your nation. Hold the Immaculate Concept for your planet. About prophecy. You might be aware that there are numerous prophecies that predict various negative events for the near and distant future. I will tell you that there are many false prophecies in the world, but I can assure you that there also are many true prophecies. Once again, prophecy is not set in stone. Prophecy is a warning from God, and the purpose is to tell people what will come to pass if they do not change their ways. I am not here to discount prophecy, but I desire to give you a new view of prophecy and the potential for changes in the earth. I have already told you that I desire to see the manifestation of a new age of peace, prosperity, and progress. The spiritual hierarch for the age of Aquarius, my beloved Saint Germain, also desires to bring forth such a golden age. However, before we can bring in this new age, many changes are needed. Therefore, I can tell you that there is a real potential for many dramatic changes on this planet. In fact, if you read the newspapers or listen to the news, you might realize that such changes are already taking place. However, I do not want any of my followers to be afraid of such changes. What is actually happening is that planet Earth, the Earth Mother, is giving birth to a child, a Christ child, in the form of a golden age. If you were to witness a woman in the process of giving birth, and if you did not know anything about childbirth, you might see this as a terrible event that inflicts great pain and suffering upon the woman. Obviously, giving birth is painful, yet most women are not overly troubled by this pain. They know it is only a temporary phenomenon, and is simply a necessary step in the process of bringing forth a beautiful child. Likewise, changes in the earth are simply birth pains, as Mother Earth gives birth to a new age. I want you to realize that the best way to help bring about this new age is to let go of all fear and concern about the future. The best thing you can do for me is to hold the Immaculate Concept for Earth. No matter what happens in the outer world, I want you to focus your inner vision on God's kingdom being manifest on this planet. If you will use your inner attunement, I will give you the vision of God's kingdom on earth. If you will seek the inner vision, that vision will help you attain a state of inner peace. The most important thing you can do for me in the coming decades is to maintain inner peace and to focus your attention on the Immaculate Concept for yourself, your brothers and sisters, and the planet as a whole. The forces of this world will attack you and attempt to make you take your attention away from God's perfection and focus it on human imperfection. Do not fall prey to this temptation. Maintain your peace and practice the spiritual technique of holding the Immaculate Concept. Today, planet Earth is a reflection of the inner vision of human beings. Tomorrow, the earth will be a reflection of the inner vision of human beings. Let those who have ears hear my words. You can help create a better future for this planet. Focus your attention on me. I will give you inner peace. My peace I give unto you. My peace I leave with you. Walk in my peace always.